Welcome to Children's Day celebration on Beyond Boundaries. Beyond Boundaries is a series of virtual sessions initiated by Takshila Educational Society to further ideas that foster learning, self-expression and ingenuity. These sessions bring articulate speakers from the world of art, education, literature, science and beyond to engage your time and mind. In today's session titled Why Would Nehru Be Interested in Us? Our speaker, Shri Apoorvanand, analyzes the tenets that guided Jawaharlal Nehru as a statesman and a citizen. Shri Apoorvanand is a scholar, professor, and writer. He holds bachelor's, master's, and doctorate in Hindi from Patna University and has been a member of faculty at Magadh University in Bodh Gaya, Mahatma Gandhi Antarrashtriya Hindi Vishvavidyalaya in Wardha, and Faculty of Arts in Delhi University. In addition to authoring the books Sundar Ka Swapna, Sahitya Ka Ekant, School or Hate Labs, and Prastut Prashna, along with numerous research papers and articles, Sri Apoorvanand writes regularly on concerns of education, culture, secularism, and human rights. Now, I would request Sir to please come and share his views.
Thank you very much, Isha, for this generous introduction and brief, because pompous introductions often bore the audience, those who have come to uh, listen to the speaker, and also create a kind of skepticism. So thank you very much for keeping it brief. Uh, Let me thank at the very outset Shraddha and Sanjeev ji uh, for giving me this opportunity to interact with all of you. Uh, the occasion, as we all know, is the birth anniversary of Jawaharlal Nehru. Uh, I say Jawaharlal Nehru and not Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru because uh, Nehru himself detested being called Pandit. Uh, Now, people continued with the practice despite his opposition, and they argued that it was merely a Sanskrit term used for scholar. Nehru was aware of the deception involved in the defense, as the title was not available to people who came from what we call in India, quote unquote, lower caste, who were scholars in their own right. The title was unearned, the Pandit title, and it was also a reminder of his Brahmin lineage. So anything which didn't come by the sweat of the brow was not to be claimed as one's own, was his abiding principle. This was Nehru. So I won't call him Pandit Nehru, I would call him Jawaharlal Nehru. The title is slightly intriguing. The title is Why Would Nehru or Would Nehru Be Interested in Us? We can flip it and say that why should we be interested in Nehru? Now, I would pose a question to you, and while doing this, I cannot see you, and I know, and let me admit before you that this offer of speaking to you was very tempting, but I was very reluctant to accept it because I know the composition of the audience, profile of the audience, and it's quite intimidating to speak before a gathering of young persons, as they have naturally a very skeptical bent of mind, and it's so very difficult to convince or persuade them with their views. But I have taken a very calculated risk, and the blame is entirely on me, not on Shraddha and Sanjeev. But at the outset, before I start my talk, I would pose a question to you, or kind of game. I would like to know since all of you, most of you, if you exclude the teachers who are present here, most of you would be in the age group of, I would say, uh, in your teens. Uh, so you are youth, you are young. Uh, and I would assume and I would ask, not assume, uh, do you think that Bhagat Singh is your icon? Or would you like to be Bhagat Singh? This is the question. So I would ask you to first think about it. Uh, do you think that uh, Bhagat Singh is your icon? And can I assume that I am sitting before different kinds of Bhagat Singhs? Uh, and the second question is that if you assume that you are Bhagat Singh, so I am sitting before Bhagat Singh, and now I am posing another question to you, and you are Bhagat Singh, that you have a choice to make. There are two leaders before you. I'm asking you to make a choice. There are two leaders before you. One is Jawaharlal Nehru, and the second is Subhash Chandra Bose. So, who would be your ideal leader? Who would be the leader you, as Bhagat Singh, would like to go with? This is the second question. So we have to quick. So if you're Bhagat Singh, I'm sitting before Bhagat Singh, uh, multitude of Bhagat Singh, I would say, and you have a choice to make. You have two leaders. One is Jawaharlal Nehru, and second is Subhash Chandra Bose. So you, as Bhagat Singh, what would be your choice? Would you choose Nehru as your leader, or would you choose Subhash Bose as your leader? So remember, you are Bhagat Singh. You are not Isha. You are not. Uh, can we be quick, because I can't proceed without that. This is the cue. Are there more? Okay. So the many who say that as Bhagat Singh they would choose Subhash Chandra Bose, uh, and there are some who say that they would choose Jawaharlal Nehru. Now we don't have a situation where we can have an interaction, and I can ask you why are you making this choice. But without wasting time, because we have only half an hour, 25 minutes to go, let me tell you what Bhagat Singh himself said. Uh, he raised this question in 1928 when Bhagat Singh was only 21. He was to be hanged 3 years later in 1931. He was hanged. So this uh, he is writing an article in July 1928 when he is 21, and the article is called "Naye Netaon ke Naye Vichar," and he is discussing two leaders. One is two emerging leaders. They have already emerged on the national scene. One is Subhash Chandra Bose, and second is Jawaharlal Nehru. And Bhagat Singh makes a very clear choice. He said that Nehru has to be the leader the youth of India, especially the youth of Punjab, should go with. Why? Why does he make this choice? Uh, Bhagat Singh writes, uh, that Subhash Chandra Bose is an emotional man, a devotee of the ancient culture of India, and he regards Nehru to be an internationalist. In his view, Bose is a soft hearted romantic and Nehru a revolutionary. After reading the speeches of the two leaders at Amritsar and Maharashtra Congress sessions, Bhagat Singh says that although both of them were supporters of Purna Swaraj, they were worlds apart in their thoughts. He is referring to a public meeting in Bombay in which Bose was the speaker and Nehru was chairing the meeting. In his speech, Subhash Chandra Bose remarked that India had a special message for the world. Now, Bhagat Singh says that it's a crazy rant. He says that Bose finds the origin of everything, including Panchayati Raj and socialism, in ancient India, and he notes that Subhash Bose believes that old times were great. Bhagat Singh finds the nationalism of Bose to be very narrow and self obsessed and differs with his view that Indian nationalism, unlike other nationalisms, is not narrow. He then moves to Nehru's presidential speech. Nehru contradicts Bose and says that all nations feel that they have some special and unique message for the world. I do not find anything special in my nation. Subhash Babu believes in such things. Now let us understand the difference between the two. Bose wants freedom from British because they belong to the West and we are from the East. Nehru wants freedom because, according to him, we can change our social system by establishing self rule. For social transformation, we need complete independence and self rule. Bhagat Singh says that for Bose, international politics matters only to the extent that it addresses the question of India's defense and its development. On the other hand, Nehru had come out of the narrow confines of nationalism and into the open fields of internationalism. Now, Bhagat Singh has compared the thoughts of these two leaders. One is Jawaharlal Nehru, and the other is Subhash Chandra Bose. And then he asks this question: now that we know their views, we must make our choice. Bose, according to him, has nothing to give to the youth to quench their intellectual thirst. He has nothing for their mind. It's very remarkable that Bhagat Singh was not impressed by the nationalist rhetoric of Bose and finds Nehru intellectually more challenging and satisfying. The youth of Punjab need intellectual nourishment badly, and they get it only from Nehru. So they should go with him to understand the real meaning of revolution. The youth should firm up their thought so that in the times of dejection and defeat, they do not get deviated. Now, it's a very interesting article, and you, Bhagat Singh's, some of you who, as Bhagat Singh, find Bose as your natural ally would be shocked by what the real Bhagat Singh is telling you to go with Nehru. Now, recently, only a day before Nehru's birthday this year, I read a very beautiful article by Gopal Krishna Gandhi. Gopal Krishna Gandhi is a scholar in his own right and grandson of Mahatma Gandhi. He also talks about something which is very similar to what Bhagat Singh was saying. He is referring to the times of Nehru and Gandhi and Patel when they were alive. And he is talking about the time about 56-year-old Jawaharlal Nehru, who was a prisoner at Ahmednagar, and who were his co-prisoners. His co-prisoners were Vallabhbhai Patel, Pattabi Sitaramaiah, Govind Vallabh Pant, Maulana Azad, J.B. Kriplani, Asaf Ali, Syed Mahmood, Narendra Dev, P.C. Kose, Shankar Rao Dev, H.K. Mehta. And what was Nehru doing? Nehru was writing his Discovery of India. Azad was writing his collection of letters, which later got published as Gubare Khate. Uh, Mehtab documented the history of Orissa. Kripalani did a study of Gandhi, and Deva constructed a Sanskrit work from French. And Sitaramaya wrote a very valuable diary. So all of them were writers, all of them. All of them were men or persons of mind. And this is something which is very remarkable and which is distinctive of not only Nehru, but of his compatriots and his contemporaries. Now, Gopal Gandhi uh, goes to the diary of Sitaramaya and talks about what these co-prisoners were doing. In the front of his veranda, the Sardar, that is Patel, has grown blue flowers interspersed with a few pinks, which present a beauty of heavenly glory. And as for Jawaharlal, the diarist wrote, the man was sowing, digging, planting, pruning, watering, and weeding in the hot sun with his hat on, and in pouring rain with his raincoat. Kripalani said Jawaharlal had turned a barren and dreary compound without even a blade of grass into a place of beauty. Now, this is very interesting because it reminds me of a comment by Baba Sahib Bhimrao Ambedkar, which he made after India had accepted uh, the constitution as its guiding principle. Now, Ambedkar says that the constitution is like a beautiful flower, it's like a beautiful plant, but it, it is being planted in a in an earth which is yet unbroken. It is a barren earth. It's an earth where old social customs still rule. So it's a challenge. You have to break the earth for this plant to flourish. Now, I found this entry of Pataramaya's diary and Kripalani's diary that Jawaharlal had turned a barren and dreary compound without even a blade of grass into a place of beauty. Now, this is something what Ambedkar wanted us to turn a barren and dreary earth without even a blade of grass. And what this even without even a blade of grass was that we had promised ourselves to be a nation uh, which would progress to secure justice, equality, freedom, and fraternity. They were not so gender sensitive, so they used the term fraternity. We can replace it with solidarity, or we can replace it with friendship. So these four ideas, that is freedom, equality, justice, and friendship, or solidarity, or togetherness, only by marching to secure these, we can turn a barren and dreary compound without even a blade of grass into a place of beauty. Now, I was referring to what Bhagat Singh said about Nehru's idea of nationalism. He said that he was an internationalist. Uh, Nehru himself said, and that this is 1955, when he was meeting Asian and African leaders at Bandung, that leaders of the great nations like the President of the United States of America have to carry a world of responsibility, a tremendous burden. Now, this is in reference to the recent election of Joe Biden as the new president of India. And Nehru wants that we should be alert and we should be aware of the dangers of nationalist individualism. We must think about world safety. So when we live in a time which is full of upsurge of nationalism and nationalist individualism, when you had a leader who talked about America first, who thought that America was better than, and usually in America it is national individualism which rules. And many times we also fall in that pit. We think that India has a special message for the rest of the world, and we were Vishwa Gurus, and all we have to do is to reclaim that status of the Vishwa Guru. And Nehru is posing a contrary or contrarian viewpoint that you need not aspire to be Vishwaguru. You need to be a friend of all nations. He says, and Gopal Gandhi quotes him, that unity is always better than disunity. But an enforced unity is a sham and dangerous affair, full of explosive possibilities. Unity must be of the head and heart, a sense of belonging together. Now, as I said, that the four principles or the four values or the four ideals which the preamble of our constitution puts before us, one of them is friendship, solidarity, fraternity, or togetherness. And this is a challenge which all of us, uh, people sitting in this meeting, uh, all of you who are youth and who live to see how India would progress and how the world would progress, and what the definition of togetherness would be, what the definition of world friendship would be, and whether we would come out of the confines, narrow confines of nationalism or not. This is a question which is before us. And the world is in turmoil everywhere, in Europe, in America, in Latin America, in Eastern Europe, in our part of the world, everywhere this question, whether we would be able to come out of the confines of narrow nationalism or not. Now, Bhagat Singh thought that internationalism is always better than nationalism. And therefore, he chose Nehru as his ideal leader, that he would lead towards internationalism. Now, what it meant establishing contacts. It meant to connect with others. It meant to be curious about others. It meant to reach out to others. It didn't mean, it never meant that we should convert others into our image. We must not think that all of us should follow us because we have the best way of life. We have to be curious, and we have to be welcoming in our approach and attitude towards others' way of living. And we need to also respect them. This is what Nehru felt uh, about coming into one's being. uh, how do you become? That is the question. How do you become? Do you become by diminishing others? Do you become at the cost of others? Or do you give equal dignity to others and thereby become what you are? This is what Nehru aspired. Nehru was very much interested in the youth. Nehru was very much interested in the teenagers. And that is how he started writing. He was interested in a growing up girl who happened to be his daughter, that is Indira Gandhi. And he wrote his letters to talk to her about the wonders of the world. And it got converted into a book called Letters Pita ke Patra Putri ke Naam, letters from father to a daughter. And later he wrote a tome, just glimpses into world history. And these were also letters written by Jawaharlal Nehru to a young, growing girl, a young woman. So he was very much interested in the youth. The question is, why should we be interested in Nehru? The answer partly was given by Bhagat Singh. The answer again partly is given by Gopal Gandhi. We have to find our own answers. And those answers we can't find if we have not read Nehru, if we are not curious about him. Uh, when we talk about Nehru, we often refer to him as the first Prime Minister of India. The 17 years of Nehru as the Prime Minister of India are the most talked about years of Nehru's life. But Nehru was essentially a rebel. Nehru was essentially a revolutionary. So the life of Nehru before 1947 is the most interesting phase of Nehru. And Nehru, who was interested in the peasants of India and the farmers of India, Nehru, who didn't like the city life of India, Nehru, who liked to be with the farmers, who liked to spend his days in the villages of Uttar Pradesh and elsewhere, who traversed the length and breadth of India, and and he said that yes, I feel as an outsider in this land, and as I know this land more and more, this wonderful land of India, India grows on me. So I cannot claim that I know everything about India, because there is much more which is unknown to me, much more which beckons me towards itself. And this is what keeps my wonderment alive. So this sense of wonder that Nehru had never allowed him to indulge or to be self-obsessive. And this is where I would stop, that a person like Nehru, and I would stop with a quote in my own words by Amrita Shergill. And I understand that you know Amrita Shergill. Amrita Shergill was an artist of great repute. And so after she received the autobiography of Nehru, she wrote to him that I liked your autobiography. I generally don't read autobiographies because uh, generally when you read autobiographies, you feel like the author is telling you that when the sea saw me, when the ocean saw me. But while reading your autobiography, I could see that you are very humbly saying that when I saw the ocean, when I saw the sea. So uh, you have this humility to say that I see the ocean, and you don't say that the ocean sees me. And this humility is what describes Nehru, what defines Nehru. This humility, this openness, this vulnerability, and this honesty, this openness, this internationalism. And this is what we need today. So Nehru would be very much interested in all of us, and he would ask us, are you interested in me? Because I looked for India. I tried to discover India for myself. Didn't claim to be Vasco da Gama, or I didn't claim to be Columbus. I discovered India, and it merged with me. Uh, so, are you also uh, planning an adventure uh, like I've had in my life, this adventure, which concluded on 27th May 1964 when Nehru died. But Nehru lives on, because the quest that Nehru had begun uh, still lives on, and all of us are part of that, you and me. Uh, Thank you very much. My time ends here, and I think this journey with Nehru and on the path of Nehru is long, is very interesting, is full of charms, and the next, I'm told, is is a very able man who would take us along, Himanshu, on this journey. So thank you very much for being with me, uh, for being patient. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir, for your enlightening words that have certainly given us a better perspective of Chacha Nehru's principles.